it's not enough for KU to just win this game. They have to come out and be dominant, especially after the performance against K-State. It's not enough for Kansas to just win by 10 points in this game. This needs to be, I think, much more of a more emphatic statement, I think, by KU after the K-State loss, in order for me to believe that they're going to set themselves up to continue on through the season and go try to make a bowl game, right? Pay heed all who enter and beware of this podcast. That's right. This is the Pay Heed podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer. Of course, I'm here with Kevin Flaherty, and we're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible, member FDIC. Thanks so much for joining us. If you haven't already, please subscribe on Apple and Spotify and over on our YouTube channel as well at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN on YouTube. Really appreciate those of you that have already done so. And if you haven't, it's one click away. What are you waiting for? Go ahead and do that. You can also share a comment. We love to hear your thoughts, and you can also leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple and Spotify on the audio side as well. So however you consume the show, we appreciate you, and we encourage you to either support the show via a rating and review, liking the channel on YouTube, subscribing to the channel on YouTube, liking the shows, and all that great stuff. So thank you so much if you have already done all of that, and we really appreciate you. Today's show, we're going to be talking about KU football ahead of the Oklahoma State game. Obviously, a very deflating loss for Kansas on last Saturday against Kansas State, and an opportunity potentially for KU to try to bounce back against an Oklahoma State team that, to put it kindly, is an unmitigated disaster. But we'll get into all of that a little bit later on in the show. We're also going to be talking some KU basketball coming up later this week, as well as KU has now played 2 exhibition games. We're going to be sharing some of our thoughts on that leading into the start of the season, which is coming up next week. So you'll want to stay tuned for that as well. So we'll have you covered on all things KU football and KU basketball for the next basically 6-7 weeks or so, maybe more if KU football does end up indeed making a bowl game. And then, of course, we'll be continuing our basketball coverage as well. So this is your home for KU football and KU basketball, and we appreciate you if you are here with us. So before we dive into KU at Oklahoma State, Kevin, there was a bit of news that came out a couple of days after the KU K-State game that I think has drawn the attention of various fan bases, and that is that one J.J. Dunnigan, who is officially a top 100 recruit. If you look at 24/7 Sports, he would have gone down as KU's second highest rated recruit ever, behind DJ Warner, funnily enough, from 2 years ago at Kansas out of high school, the corner from Manhattan High. He ends up decommitting from KU on Tuesday or what? Let's see, we're doing this on Wednesday. My days are all mixed up. Monday night is when it came out. We're recording this on Wednesday afternoon. Monday night is when the announcement was made. This was the top player in the class for Kansas, not only in their entire class, but also from the state of Kansas, which obviously that's been a big emphasis for KU recruiting-wise. So, Kevin, I'll just first off kind of kick it to you with your reaction to that and maybe the significance of J.J. Dunnigan decommitting from Kansas.
Yeah, I actually like J.J. Dunnigan more than DJ Warner at the same point. And, obviously, Nick, you're on verbal commitment with us, and we've had J.J. Dunnigan as the number one player in the state. And it'll be interesting because I think he and Ian Premer are kind of in lockstep to see where that finishes up. But you're talking about, from a football standpoint, you're talking about a guy who's taller than 6'2", 200 pounds, great length. You've seen him in person multiple times as well, Nick. I think he's bigger, faster, better than he was a year ago when we ranked him as the number one player in the state. From a football standpoint, it really hurts. And I think one of the things that is positive for KU is by having J.J. Dunnigan committed, by getting him committed early on, J.J. Dunnigan played a part in this class being what it is from a local standpoint. Kansas had Jalen Mason, was the first local guy to toss his hat in the ring, the quarterback from Wichita Northwest. J.J. Dunnigan, I believe, was the second in-state guy to pledge right around New Year's. And then all of a sudden you start really, you get Nate Sims in the boat. You get Hunter Higgins in the boat. You get Tyron Parker, who was close with J.J. in the boat. And so having him in the class helped KU build the class to what it was. From a football standpoint, it really hurts because I think he's good enough that he could have played early. He was somebody that KU had actually kind of sold the Travis Hunter thing to a little bit. Said, hey, you'll get a chance to catch some passes. We've seen him at wide receiver. That's not out of the ordinary for a guy who's that tall, that long, and that fast to have him come in and do that. Obviously, Nick, and I think you have a tweet here that you wanted to go through. People are going to wonder why, right? And the timing in particular, I think, is unfortunate, given that I think this has maybe been trending this way for a little while. And to see it come right after the Kansas State game, of course, there are those who are going to leap up and say, oh my gosh, that was it. He was there at the game. He saw what happened. He's, and then he leaves and he's going somewhere else. I think that's a little too reductive. I think that it was something where JJ's been getting offers from some of the nation's biggest quote unquote football schools for a long time in this process, and that didn't slow down after he committed to KU. And I think that it's something that continued to speed up even in recent weeks. And so I think that the timing stinks in that it does feel like, hey, this guy is bailing after this. But I actually had a chance to talk to JJ on Friday. I was out there at Manhattan High's game to see JJ, interviewed him afterwards. And I don't get the feeling that this was something that came about, after Saturday's game. I think this was headed that direction.
Yeah, the timing, as you said, was very unfortunate in circumstances. You lose obviously pretty badly at home to K-State, as you said, in front of JJ Dunnigan and many other recruits, including some other guys that are also already committed to the program. And then you have this come out on Monday night that he's decommitting. And I think you outlined it pretty well. Like this, I think it would be kind of silly to just simply say, well, he obviously decommitted because Kansas State beat KU. And I'm sure there are plenty of K-State fans that already believe that and are going to continue to believe that no matter what evidence is put in front of them. And that's fine. You know what? They can just live in their law land, whatever. That's fine. But yeah, this definitely seems like something where, and you know better than anybody, Kevin, I mean, in this era of recruiting, especially when it comes to NIL and whatnot, yeah, even if a kid is committed somewhere, that doesn't stop other schools from coming in and saying, hey, how much is this school giving you? Oh, maybe we could, sweeten the deal a little bit. Oh, how much, oh, you're getting this much? Well, we could maybe give you this, so those conversations, I think, especially when you're talking about a player of JJ Dunnigan's caliber, who again is a top 100 player in the country, right? So, we're not talking about somebody, just a random player. We're talking about a top 100 player in the country by most recruiting sites, including 24/7 Sports. So when that happens, yeah, I'm sure there are plenty of schools that are around and trying to see how firm that commitment is, right? And so, yes, the timing is unfortunate, but I don't get it twisted. I don't think it has anything to do with the fact that KU lost to K-State in the fashion they did on Saturday, even though that decommitment came just 2 days after it. And you also mentioned, in this era as well of social media, that generally leads to a lot of speculation and a lot of people saying things online, and
sure,
including JJ Dunnigan's own father, who in the comments on JJ Dunnigan's decommitment post basically suggested that part of the reason why they did it was because Lance Leipold might be leaving Kansas. Obviously, I don't believe that for a second. I think that's probably just a bit more of a smokescreen of trying to deflect maybe perhaps to the real reason why the decommitment happened. But I don't know. We'll see. I mean, obviously, it's kind of chaotic. The only other thing I'll kind of ask you on this before we do shift gears back towards more what's happening this week with KU and Oklahoma State is JJ Dunnigan decommits. And look, I know we just got finished saying that he didn't do it because of the KU K-State game, but obviously that KU K-State game still does have an impact, right? And so just looking forward really briefly, I mean, Kansas has many other high school commits already locked in. Just is there any concern for more of a mass exodus at this point, or do you feel like KU's commitment class is still pretty solid?
Yeah, I wouldn't expect a mass exodus. I mean, you could still lose like a guy or two, but I think it would be more along the lines of JJ Dunnigan, right? Where it's, hey, other offers are coming in, whether people feel like, hey, it's from a bigger school, better opportunity, more NIL, whatever reason. I think that would be the reason versus what happened there. And I don't encourage people to talk to recruits because obviously that's not a good thing. But I will say, as somebody who does talk to recruits, if you were able to hear those conversations most of them don't think that way, Nick. Like if they're at a game like that, they aren't thinking like, oh my gosh, like if I come here, K-State's going to do the same thing to me. These are guys that feel like, hey, I'm the top of the food chain. Like that's not going to happen to me. And I think when you look at some of the responses of guys like Hunter Higgins, like Jalen Mason, who we mentioned earlier on Twitter, I think that's the way that guys like that see it, is like, okay, that stinks that it happens. Obvious that it happened. Obviously, wanted KU to win that game, but we have a chance to change that. When we go there, we can put in the work. We can go out on the field and we can break the streak. We can beat those guys, etc. And so I'm always taken back. I want to say at some point USC had like 8 or 9 parade All-America running backs like all at the same time under Pete Carroll. And my dad asked me, he goes, why in the world would all those guys go to USC? Like, can't they see the other 8 parade All-Americans sitting there? And you have to almost kind of explain that, like, none of those guys are looking at it like there's 8 other guys. They're like, well, those are the guys that are going to be my backups. Like, that's the mindset that a lot of these guys have. And so, yeah, if KU does lose another guy in this class, I don't think it's going to be something that you're going to point to and say, oh, it was the KU K-State game. Guys don't really think that way. You might have somebody else leave, for one reason or another that is more related to the actual recruiting part of it. But from a game standpoint, I think I don't want to say it even hurt with those guys, but I think it would hurt you more with guys who were uncommitted, like the 2027s and 2028s that were there, as opposed to guys that have already picked Kansas. I think those guys have already had a long time to kind of talk to themselves and be like, man, we're going to kick butt when we get to Lawrence, and they still feel that way regardless of what happened on Saturday.
Well, speaking of what happened on Saturday, obviously we talked about it on our post-game show. It felt like a major setback for Kansas, a major blow in along all fronts, right? And so before we dive deeper into Oklahoma State, I guess my initial reaction to that, Kevin, is after having slept on it for a couple of days is, can Kansas bounce back, right? You're sitting at 4-4. You've got certainly a winnable game coming up this Saturday that we'll talk about more. And then you look at the rest of the schedule, you've got a tough trip to Ames. You'll go to Arizona next week, which doesn't seem like it will be a gimme game. And then you finish the year with Utah. So I think the question now for me becomes, okay, can you bounce back? And for all of the griping and kind of frustration that I've had, and I think the annoyance that I've had with maybe sort of how Lance Leipold will sometimes approach games like the K-State game and sort of this mentality of, hey, it's just another game. It's just another game. We're just going to keep moving forward. While I do find that frustrating and annoying, we have actually a chance to, again, see the flip side of that, which is sort of why it tends to work with Lance Leipold, because, okay, that game is over, you put it behind you and you move forward, right? Now you're just on to the next game, right? You're just moving forward onto the next game. And obviously we've seen this team already last year band together in not a situation as bad as this one, in a situation worse than this one, actually, when they were 1-5 and they finished the year, they pick up 3 strong wins. There was a bit of a dud at the end of the year against Baylor, but still you salvaged what could have spiraled into a 2 or 3 win season potentially, and picked up a couple of big ranked wins. And now you feel like you're in a little bit of a similar situation. Like, we had a chance to hear from some of the players on Tuesday afternoon, and you can check out on our YouTube channel for yourself some of what they had to say. But I got sort of a similar vibe, right? In fact, I think Kobe Bain specifically brought up how, hey, last season when we were 1-5, we banded together. So the vibes feel kind of similar from that standpoint because of just, how much you got eviscerated by K-State on last Saturday. And so that's the question for me now is, can you basically replicate that? Can you band together and pick up 2 or 3 more wins and set yourself up to have, another bowl season and obviously maybe still not quite exactly what you're hoping for, but still sort of, I guess, salvaging this last third of the season that you have left now?
Yeah, the big thing is getting to a bowl game, right? And I know, like, some people would not be happy with the 6-6 bowl game, and I get that. But you really want those bowl practices, especially with the young guys you've got on this roster, especially with how many guys they could return on defense. Nick, have you looked at that at all? Like, I mean, it's a pretty sizable group. I get you can't count on anything in the portal era. You could lose a guy here or there, but Kansas could return a pretty nice nucleus of guys that maybe took their lumps this year on defense and would head into next year with the expectation of being a lot better defensively. And so those bowl practices are so important. And Nick, I think that's what makes this game so important is it's not just the next one, right? It's the one where if you're looking at the games the rest of the season, I'm not saying this is the only game that KU will be favored in, but it feels like the only game that KU would be significantly favored in. And so you really need to get across the finish line. And I'll say this too, Nick, Oklahoma State is live bait in this one. Like they are not dead in the water by any means. If you watch them against Texas Tech, that was a team that came out and played really hard. They held Texas Tech's rushing attack down, which of course KU saw Texas Tech's rushing attack up close and personal. It didn't go super well. And so they're playing really hard, and it's not, people always talk about the most dangerous, team being one with their backs against the wall. Oklahoma State doesn't have their back against the wall, right? After the loss to Texas Tech, they can't go to a bowl game, but I almost feel like that makes them more dangerous in that there's no pressure, right? And you saw last year, once the weight of expectations came off of that Kansas team, I'm not saying that's the reason they beat 3 ranked teams, but I do think that there was something to be said for the fact that, okay, we're not playing for a Big 12 title. We're sitting here at 1-5. Let's just go out there, have fun, and play well. And that was one of the things that Kobe Bain said was bring joy, right? And I think that Oklahoma State right now, when you look at them, they seem like they're enjoying playing football. Meacham talked about this week, or maybe it was right after the Texas Tech game, about how live their sidelines are. The fact that everybody seems so invested. And so on one hand, you have a team where you're like, well, Kansas should win this game. And I don't want to divert from that. Kansas should win this game. But the other part that I'll say, Nick, is this can't be a game that you come out flat and say, oh, we're going to beat Oklahoma State because Oklahoma State's 1-7. I actually think Oklahoma State's playing better right now than they were early in the year.
Yeah, I mean, Kansas is 24-point favorites, Kevin.
Yeah.
And that was kind of something that I wanted to circle back to before we take a break and dive deeper into this game. Is it's not enough for KU to just win this game. They have to come out and be dominant, especially after the performance against K-State. It's not enough for Kansas to just win by 10 points in this game. This needs to be, I think, much more of a more emphatic statement, I think, by KU after the K-State loss, in order for me to believe that they're going to set themselves up to continue on through the season and go try to make a bowl game, right? Like that's kind of where I'm at. Like, just simply winning this game is not enough. You need to go out and you need to make a statement. You need to go out and you need to prove that, this team is still fighting, this team is still together, and you still are battling towards, your goals of, at this point, making a bowl game or having a strong finish of the season. So that's kind of where I'm at. That's where I view this game, is that just simply winning would not satisfy me. There needs to be some extra oomph behind this game and behind this performance from KU on Saturday. So let's take a quick break, and then we will dive deeper into some of the numbers on Oklahoma State. You mentioned Doug Meacham, old friend alert. We'll get into that and more coming up on either side. But for right now, calling all Chiefs fans, you could be on the field at the 50-yard line inside GEHA Field for the official coin toss at a Chiefs home game this season. Visit Chiefs.com/GEHA now. Enter to win for a chance to be on the field for a once-in-a-lifetime view of the pregame coin toss. Plus, you can score other exclusive prizes. Enter for a chance to win at Chiefs.com/GEHA. GEHA is a proud partner of the Kansas City Chiefs. More KU football talk is coming up next.
I'm Brett Goodwin, one of the owners of The Learning Tree. The Learning Tree is a neighborhood toy store in Prairie Village, Kansas. This has been here in this location since 2000s, and my husband Alan and I purchased the store in 2023. Alan and I grew up in families where we've always wanted to have a business together. Alan grew up, for instance, his parents had a jewelry store. I worked in a local toy store here in Prairie Village when I was growing up. When this opportunity happened in 2023, we knew right away we wanted to contact them and pursue the store. We wouldn't have been able to get the store without the team at Emprise Bank. From the day we contacted them, they knew what we needed to do, which was very helpful. I would absolutely recommend the team at Emprise Bank to anyone looking to secure a business. We worked with Emprise from day one. They were extremely helpful. They were always great resources. We talked to them frequently. They know the area. They're very friendly. We know who we're going to talk with, and they know what we need to do. We hope we'll see you at the Learning Tree.
This is the paid podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer, along with Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible. Member FDIC. If you haven't already, please subscribe. Apple, Spotify, and on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN. Because win, lose, tie, I guess you can't tie in college football, but whatever the outcome is on Saturday, we're going to be live on our YouTube channel to talk about it after the game. It's a 3:00 kick, so you can expect us to be live at around 6:15, 6:30 within 15, 20 minutes following the conclusion of the game. Or the best way to make sure you know when we go live is to subscribe, and then you'll be notified when we're live. So be sure to do that on our YouTube channel. Come hang out, come join us to talk about this game against Oklahoma State. We're going to be talking some more KU basketball as well coming up later on this week, as Kansas has concluded its exhibition schedule with a win on Tuesday night against Fort Hays State. We'll be talking about that. Reactions to the Louisville game as well, as Kansas basketball gets ready to take the court in a real live game coming up next week as well. All right, let's dive into this Oklahoma State team a little bit more in depth, Kevin. We kind of danced around a little bit in the first segment. Oklahoma State is bad. They're really bad. In every sense of the word, they are terrible. Any numbers you try to find on them, it's just atrocious. It just goes from bad to worse. They are 1-7. They fired their previous head coach, Mike Gundy, who of course had a 20-plus year run at Oklahoma State as really, Kevin, one of the most consistent coaches in the country in terms of what he did at Oklahoma State. But unfortunately, it feels like he was a casualty of the new era of NIL. Wasn't really able to quite adapt quick enough or accept it, I guess. And ultimately, after a 1-2 start, they end up firing him on September 23rd. Before the start of conference play, they lost at home against Tulsa 19-12. They fired him. Since they fired him, they have gone 0-5 in conference play. They got the fired head coach buff against Baylor. I don't know if you remember the first game after they fired him against Baylor. They were kind of in the game. They were kind of hanging around. They ended up losing 45-27. But since then, in their last 4 games, Kevin, they've scored 13, 17, 17, and then they were shut out by Texas Tech. So in their last 4 games, they've scored just under 12 points per game. Oh, and by the way, also, they've had 4 games this season in which they did not eclipse 100 passing yards. So that's the other bad part, is they dealt with some many issues at the quarterback position. Their quarterback situation is a complete disaster. Kevin, officially, if you look at their stats for the season, they have had 8 different players attempt to pass. 8. Yes. That should tell you how bad it has been at their quarterback spot.
You can tweak that. I was going to say, you can tweak that a little bit when you have like a position player throw a pass, but in this case, they actually had a guy move from wide receiver to play quarterback. So yes. That's what you're looking at here.
Yes. And speaking of the quarterback situation for Oklahoma State, it's a bit unclear who their starter is even going to be coming up on Saturday. Zane Flores has been hurt, but I think he might be on the path to coming back. He's certainly been, I guess, the most reliable passer that Oklahoma State has had. Funnily enough, Zane Flores, I say that he's been the most reliable passer. He actually doesn't have a passing touchdown this season. Funnily enough, he is 696 yards, no touchdowns, 3 interceptions. But he's been still their most reliable passer, which again should tell you just how bad things have been for them. You mentioned it in the first segment, Kevin. This is also an old friend alert game in a number of different ways. You alluded to it. Doug Meacham, who was their offensive coordinator, was promoted. I don't know if promoted is the right term. He became the interim head coach after the firing of Mike Gundy. Of course, Kansas football fans should absolutely recognize that name, as he was the offensive coordinator at Kansas for a couple of years in the late 2010s, and was ultimately not very successful at Kansas. Ends up at Oklahoma State as the offensive coordinator, and then now interim head coach. But that is not the only old friend alert. The other old friend alert is one Clint Bowen, who was at Kansas, again, also as a defensive coordinator for a very long period of time over the course of KU's career. And Clint Bowen, Kevin, was also at one point interim head coach at Kansas, correct? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
How
to win as interim head coach.
Yeah, was that 2015, I think, or before that?
State.
Yeah, somewhere around there. So he was interim head coach at Kansas.
I think it was 14. I think it was the end of 14, and then David Beatty took over in 15.
Gotcha. I hate to say it, but when you have that many years of futility, they all just kind of
run together. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But then he most recently, Kevin, was the head coach. If you're in the Lawrence area, he was the head coach at Lawrence High School for LHS, the Chesty Lions, and then ultimately decided to move to Oklahoma State this season. I believe he was originally hired as like a defensive analyst or just a staff member, basically for the defense for Oklahoma State. But amidst their staff shakeup, he ends up as the calling the defensive plays. Also, his son Banks Bowen, who was previously committed to Tulsa, flipped to Oklahoma State when Clint Bowen took the job there, and he is one of the 8 quarterbacks that has officially registered a pass this season as well at Oklahoma State. So, yeah, it's kind of a weird deal how that's all worked out. But the bottom line is Oklahoma State, they are again 1-7, 0-5 in the conference. They haven't scored more than 17 points in a game. I think just only once this season they've scored more than 17 points. That was in the 45-27 loss to Baylor. The offense has been absolutely atrocious. Again, they've had 4 games this season where they haven't passed for more than 100 yards. It's been really, really tough sledding for them. And again, Kansas 24-point favorites coming into this game. So kind of going back to what I mentioned before we went to the break is it wouldn't be enough for me, Kevin, for Kansas to just simply win this game. You're playing. I know that you tried to hype Oklahoma State up a little bit by calling them live bait. These boys look pretty dead to me for all intents and purposes when they're on the field. So it's not enough that Kansas needs to win this game. I think Kansas needs to come out and make a pretty big statement, right? I think really to hopefully reel back in some fans, some disheartened fans, myself included, truthfully, after the loss to K-State, like you need to come out and I think put together a really strong performance and a comprehensive performance in a game like this against an opponent like this.
Yeah, I think especially defensively, right? When you look at Zane Flores is probably going to be back. Rodney Fields, the running back, didn't play against Texas Tech. He should be back. They basically said in the press conference, like, yeah, maybe he could have gone against Texas Tech, but we wanted to get him full speed for Kansas. But even with that being said, this is a team that has really struggled offensively. I think there's more to like with them defensively, and I think they've taken a step forward with Clint Bowen at the helm, actually. But I think offensively in particular, if Kansas's defense, really struggles in this one and Oklahoma State moves the ball and has a lot of success, that's not a very good sign because this is a team that has really struggled offensively, worse offensively than they are defensively. And friend McLean Baxley, who is basically the Michael Swain, if you will, for Oklahoma State, he put out a stat, I think, that said something like in the previous 10 years from 2013 through 2023, Oklahoma State had been held under 200 yards, I think, once in that entire time period. They've been held under it 3 times in the last 2 years, including twice this year, including their last game against Texas Tech. So the offense, comes in not really operating at a high level. They're talking about, hey, let's rotate some young guys through. They're talking about playing a true freshman more at wide receiver. I liked him out of high school. He's a guy that can move a little bit. But at the same time, this isn't a game where you're going to look at it, and if your defense gives up, 24, 27 points, you're going to feel real good about it. You're going to say, oh, man, this is the game that, this is a get-right game, I think, for the Kansas defense. And that's just, I'm not trying to be disrespectful to Oklahoma State, but that's kind of what it needs to be for Kansas's defense. This needs to be a game like the West Virginia game or some of the other games where the defense did really show up well.
I am trying to be disrespectful to Oklahoma State.
Oh, I can tell.
I mean, these boys are terrible. Just to put a couple numbers in perspective for what you're mentioning on the offense. Kevin, in 8 games, they have 12 offensive touchdowns. 12.
Yeah.
By the way, the next lowest in the Big 12 is 21. They have 9 less touchdowns offensively than any other team.
Is that West Virginia?
I can look at it right now for you. I believe it is, let's see. Yes, it is West Virginia. Yes. Well, funnily enough, you may find this surprising, actually. West Virginia has 21. There's another team that has 21 that I don't think you would ever guess. Arizona State.
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't have guessed that.
21 offensive touchdowns this season. Then you have Colorado with 24. Houston's got 26. Arizona 27. And then pretty much everybody else has at least 30. I guess I missed UCF. UCF is 26 as well. But yeah, they're averaging for the year, they're averaging just 14.5 points per game.
Sure.
It's been really rough for the offense for Oklahoma State. So I would just underscore and echo everything you said about the defense. Yeah, this has to be, I think, particularly right. Like when I kind of frame this game and I say, that, hey, I want this to be an emphatic statement for Kansas. I am actually, I think, more talking about the defense, right? Like, if from my perspective, if the offense just goes out and plays like an average game, they should be able to put up, 28 points plus it, right? But it's really about the defense in this one, right? It's really about the defense of, dude, you are playing a horrible, horrible offense.
Yeah.
Make them look horrible. Like, make them look like what they are, which is really bad. And that's something that I really want to see from this defense in this game. So flipping to the other side, you mentioned Oklahoma State's defense being a little bit better. Again, the numbers are still pretty bad. I mentioned the 12 offensive touchdowns for Oklahoma State offensively. Kevin, they've surrendered 40 touchdowns by their defense.
I do a quick math check because that feels like 40 is more than 12.
40 is indeed more than 12. Yes, it's a lot more than 12, actually. They surrendered 40 touchdowns. The next lowest in the conference, by the way, is 32. You want to take a guess on who that is, Kevin?
Ooh. I'm trying to think who's just bad defensively. I don't know. Who is it?
Is it Baylor?
It's Baylor, yeah.
It's Baylor. Baylor has surrendered 32 defensive touchdowns. But again, that's still 8 better.
By the way, you remember that like Twitter graphic that somebody said where it felt like every Angels game you'd see like Mike Trout is like 4 with 2 home runs, or Shohei Ohtani does something that nobody has done since Tungsten Mojo, and they lose 8-3. That's Baylor this year because like you watch Sawyer Robertson and that dude is uncorking like NFL throw after NFL throw, and you're like, my God. And then you look up at the final score and it's like Baylor lost to somebody. It's like, what the heck is doing? Like Sawyer Robertson is out there. Like, I don't know what the stats say. I can just tell it because without KU playing Baylor this year, but I can tell you from the Baylor that I've watched and the highlights from Baylor I've watched, like Sawyer Robertson has to be among the country's leaders in Pro Football Focus's like big time throws stat. And they just keep losing anyway.
Well, he does lead the conference in yards and touchdowns and yards per game. So if that gives you any sense on that, but yeah, this Oklahoma State defense, Kevin, for the season, they are allowing 38.9 points per game, which is second worst in the country. Only Georgia State has been worse in terms of points allowed per game. So similar to the discussion around KU's defense against the Oklahoma State offense, this is a defense for Oklahoma State that Kansas should be able to capitalize against. You did mention their run defense has been a little bit better. Their pass defense has been atrocious when you look at the numbers. And another thing to keep an eye on, and this is something maybe where I would really look at for KU offensively in this game, Kevin, is the other aspect of Oklahoma State that is really, really been horrible is it's unbelievable how bad they are on third down defense. I mean, they are surrendering nearly 50% conversion rate on defense, which is just insane to think about. And on the flip side, that's been Kansas's bugaboo, right? I mean, Jim Zebrowski talked about it a little bit more in his press conference on Tuesday about, converting on third downs and how that's been a big issue for Kansas. And as bad, look, I'll just say this, as bad as the Oklahoma State offense has been, and we've obviously thrown out some stats to sort of highlight that, Kevin, Oklahoma State's offense has a higher third down conversion percentage than Kansas. Oklahoma State has been better on third downs offensively than Kansas to this point in the season.
Yeah, well, what happens when a movable, when an unstoppable force meets a movable object? But no, it's interesting on that defense though too, Nick, because where does a lack of roster depth usually show up the most? It's special teams, right? I mean, that's where you notice like, hey, we just don't have enough quality guys out there. And against Texas Tech, they had a blocked punt that led to a touchdown. I think Texas Tech ran like the opening kickoff back too.
They did.
And Oklahoma State scored 0 points offensively, scored 7 points for Texas Tech defensively because they had a ball stripped in return for a touchdown. So they were actually, their offense was outscored by Texas Tech's defense in that game. But they did give up explosives too on defense. And I think, as well as they did against the run, they gave up 6 pass plays, I think, of 20 or more yards. There are some good players on that defense. I think when you look through and actually watch them, you'd be surprised a little bit. Like, hey, Wendell Gregory, the edge rusher, is pretty good. They do have a pretty good cornerback, I think, in LaDainian Fields. The front 7 isn't bad, but at the same time, it hasn't really come together. Their run fits have been better over the last maybe couple weeks. You saw that against Texas Tech, but at the same time, with Jalen coming off of the game that he just had, you have to think Kansas is thinking, hey, this is going to be a game where maybe we can generate some explosives down the field and kind of get things back on track from that regard.
Yeah, and keeping with the theme of this being sort of a potential get-right game for Kansas, something you mentioned as well is the pass defense for Oklahoma State has also been really bad. They're allowing almost 300 yards per game passing. And so we talked about Jalen Daniels obviously having arguably one of the worst games of his career last week against K-State. Well, this should be a game where he has an opportunity to hopefully sort of rebuild some of that confidence and be able to move the ball effectively through the air after the game that he had against K-State. So that's something else to keep in mind.
Yeah, for sure. And Jalen's not a guy, I don't think he really struggles from a confidence standpoint for the most part, but there's nothing that helps your confidence more than just getting right back out there and having a big game, getting a win, and then feeling like, okay, like that was a one-game blip on the radar. Because I think as much criticism as Jalen took after the K-State game, and I'm not saying that some of that criticism wasn't warranted because he did really struggle, I do think that people were kind of almost retconning the season that he's had up to that point, where he has had a really terrific season. You'd love to see him get back on track to where you feel like, hey, heading into those final 3 games, you only got to win one of them to go to a bowl, and you've got Jalen Daniels back, feeling like he's Jalen Daniels.
Yeah, and he went into that K-State game, Kevin, with 18 touchdowns and 1 interception on the year?
He had 2.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, I mean, he went into that K-State game as, I think, you've done a good job of talking about it, I think, quite a bit. He went into that K-State game having statistically one of the best seasons in Kansas history, and also he was one of the top quarterbacks in the Big 12 as well prior to that K-State game. So, I don't really, as you mentioned, I don't really have any doubt that Jalen Daniels has that confidence, right? But obviously, you'd love to see him again take advantage of what has been a very poor pass defense and maybe get some of that back a little bit as well. So overall, again, it's not a good Oklahoma State team. There's a reason KU is favored by 24 points, which, by the way, that there's no way that's happened anytime in the last 20 years probably, or at least 18 years or so. So that's something that's got my attention as well. But we'll see what happens with this game. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll dive into some players to watch and give some our score predictions, and also hear a little bit more on the betting side from KCSN's own betting analyst, Ben Heisler. That's coming up next.
What is good, everybody? Ben Heisler, KCSN betting analyst, here to talk a little Okie State and Kansas. From the booth this week, the Jayhawks coming in at minus 24.5 at home, with the total sitting at 57.5. We'll get to our play in just a second, but I do have to ask you guys, what's your favorite touchdown? Because for me, it's the next one. And that's because with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, every touchdown could bring you closer to cashing in. There's first touchdown scorer props, anytime touchdown props, last touchdown props. You can get in live in-game betting. All of it's available. Every snap remains loaded with opportunity. And here's the best part. New customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets instantly. So in talking about this matchup, first thought is that, KU opened up as a massive favorite. The lines moved from 22.5 up to 24.5. And it does feel like a lot, especially for a team like KU that's coming off of a disappointing home loss last week to K-State 42-17. But also remember that Oklahoma State was throttled by Texas Tech 42-0. Their quarterback passed for 48 yards, 9 of 19 attempts. They just didn't do anything. Like they're just dead in the water trying to get through this season. And if you're KU, you have a nice spot to try and get yourself back to 500 in conference play, get over 500 on the year. There's nothing for Oklahoma State to really play for, and they haven't shown signs of getting themselves together. So with all the talent that's on KU, especially on offense, there's no reason why they can't cover this 24.5 and may even get close to doing so, I think, in the first half. There's no concern for me that this turns into some sort of a backdoor cover for Oklahoma State. I just don't think they're giving you anything. Their leading receiver right now has got 280 yards. That's about it. Their quarterback, 696 yards, 0 touchdowns, 3 picks in Zane Flores, who's likely to start this week. So I'm buying in. I think Jim Daniels has a much better and much improved week for this week. So give me KU minus 24.5. Yes, it's still a lot of points, but it is at home in a good bounce back spot for the Jayhawks. So whether you decide to play it, whether you decide to fade it, that's up to you. But your team hitting pay dirt pays out to you. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app, use the code KCSN. That is code KCSN for new customers to turn $5 into $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY to 467-369. In Connecticut, help is all available for problem gambling. Just call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas. Pass-through of per-wager tax may apply in Illinois. You must be 21 plus. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bet must win to receive bonus bets, which expire in 7 days. Minimum odds required. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, visit dkng.co/audio. Limited time offer.
This is the Pay Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer with Kevin Flaherty. If you're not already, what are you doing? And what are you waiting for? Subscribe on Apple and Spotify on the audio side. Leave us a 5-star rating and review. And you can also like the channel or like the show and subscribe to the channel on YouTube as well. And again, we will be live on Saturday afternoon, or I guess Saturday early evening, following the KU Oklahoma State game on a YouTube channel from David Booth, Kansas Memorial Stadium. So you'll want to come hang out with us and join us for what hopefully will be a much better conversation on Saturday evening than what we had after the KU K-State game this past Saturday. So, all right, Kevin, let's get into some players to watch for this game. Starting with the offensive side of the ball, who's somebody you're keeping an eye on?
Yeah, I know I've mentioned him recently, but to me, this game screams Emmanuel Henderson. He's a guy that, when you look at the way that Texas Tech talked about him before and after the game, it was very clear that part of their game plan was do not let this guy beat us. And when you heard Chris Kleiman after the KU State game, he was like, I think Emmanuel Henderson's one of the best wide receivers in the conference, and he's a guy that we had to track. And he's had two quiet games kind of in a row when you look at that. And so I think this is a game where you want to get some explosives down the field. And I think you'd really like to sort of unlock Emmanuel Henderson in the way that you did earlier this year. And maybe you even have a new play or something you haven't run a whole lot to try and get him over the top of the defense. But I think that as much as we're sitting here and talking about, hey, this would be a great get-right game for Jalen, and you'd love to see him bounce back, the biggest thing that could help him would be, hey, Emmanuel Henderson has 2 touchdowns of 20 or more yards, and you feel Emmanuel Henderson starting to kind of get back in that groove because he is such a big part of this offense. And I think when you look at the injuries at tight end and the way that room has kind of been depleted and all of the different things, nothing would help this team out more, I think, than sort of Emmanuel Henderson reestablishing himself as the guy who can go make big plays in the passing game and can really, sort of create those, 1, 2, 3 play touchdown drives because he can get over the top.
Well, I think that's what kind of adds to that frustration of the K-State game is it felt like you had a couple of those opportunities, right? And you had that missed back shoulder throw on the 3rd down. There was a play on a post route where Jalen overthrew him in the end zone. So, that kind of added that frustration level of K-State is it felt like you did have a couple opportunities. And, with a player like Emmanuel Henderson and the explosive speed that he has, you want to take advantage of those, right? And so, he's going to be a guy to watch, but Jalen's going to have to get him the ball as well. And also, hey, if you're having trouble hitting him with the deep ball, something new that they could go back to with him is get him the ball on a jet sweep, get him the ball on some bubble screen, just get the ball in his hands, right? Because he is that level of player, I think. So, I'm actually going to go. I'm going to look at the running backs, Kevin. I'm going to go with Daniel Highshaw here. Watching this game, and here's why. Daniel Highshaw had it probably went completely overlooked by most people. He had his best game of the season by far against K-State. He was running aggressively. He had that great touchdown run where he broke like 18 billion thousand tackles and wouldn't be stopped and ended up scoring a touchdown against K-State. It feels like he's back. And we had a chance to talk to him actually on Tuesday afternoon. And, it seemed like he kind of felt that way as well. And, he's one of those guys that, Kevin, the clock is ticking on his career, right? He doesn't have very many more of these times to go out there. Same deal when we talked with Keenan Caldwell on Tuesday. It's kind of that same feeling, right? And so I just get the sense that Daniel Highshaw's got one more big game in him, one more game where he's going to make several plays a la Duke 2021, where it's just like, oh my God, he did what? Like, I just think he's got one more of those left in him. And I think this Oklahoma State game could be it, because it looks like he's feeling his best. It looks like he's playing at his best after the K-State game. And again, that's a room where LaShawn Williams' status is seemingly still questionable, that he ended up not really playing at all against K-State. So I think this could be a Daniel Highshaw. And you know what? This even makes me think, you remember 2022 with Devin Neal, when he ran for almost 300 yards against Oklahoma State.
I'm pretty sure, by the way, I know we've talked about this. I'm pretty sure he got Gundy's vote for Big 12 Player of the Year that year. Because Devin Neal got one vote for Big 12 Player of the Year that year, and you go back and look like through the schedule, it's like, well, there's only one coach that it makes a ton of sense that he would pick him as the offensive player of the year. I think it's Mike Gundy. Well, I think that he actually picked up a vote for Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year from Mike Gundy based on that game.
Yeah. And so I'm not saying that Daniel Highshaw is going to do that, but
sounds like
I think he is. I think he's poised potentially to have a really strong game, and I think he would be the type of guy where you would feel so happy to see him do that, because of the type of career that he's had, and he's dealt with so much, injury wise and whatnot, and I would just love for him to come out and have a game like that, and this seems like a good opportunity to do so.
Yeah, it's so cool to hear the coaches and the guys in the program talk about the growth that he's made as a person as well. Right? I mean, that's part of this process that I don't feel like we concentrate on enough. It is, yes, the football aspect of it is important, but ultimately they are trying to make these guys into great men as well. And kudos to Highshaw for the work that he's put in there. I want to give you a stat real quick, Nick, because I think a lot of people they thought Highshaw played well against Kansas State, but of course he wound up with under 4 yards a carry. He had 67 yards. Do you know how many of those were after contact?
Oh my gosh, probably like 50.
You hit it right on the head. 50 yards.
Oh, how about that?
50 of the 67 were after contact. And so when you look at the offensive line and you say, hey, if these guys can make the added block, and I'm telling you, Nick, as somebody who watches these games on tape, the offensive line has not been far off in the run game. A lot of times it's a split-second thing, a little bit of an angle here. If they come out and play well in this game where Daniel Highshaw isn't having to make, 50 of his 67 yards after contact, then that would be such a great look for Kansas moving forward, because I think that with the way Kansas is going right now, I love the way that Lance Leipold put it this week, where he said, did we put too much on Jalen for the K-State game? Maybe, but also like he's been that guy for us. It would help this team so much to add another gear that they can hit to have an effective offense, where the other team isn't looking at it and saying, Jalen's got to beat us. If he doesn't beat us, we're beating Kansas. To be able to have that run game that you can lean on in a more respectable way, in a way where you can really count on it, and even count on it in spots, Nick, where the other team knows that you want to run the ball. When it's 3rd and 2 and you're like, we want to run the ball, and they're like, they want to run the ball. If you can still run the ball, that would help this team maybe more than any other thing that they could do in this game.
Yeah. Flipping to the defensive side of the ball, you mentioned it earlier in the show. Feels like an opportunity for the Kansas defense to get right against a weaker offensive opponent. Is there anybody in particular that you're going to be keeping an eye on in that area?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of somebody specific. I asked DK McDonald about the defensive ends this week, and asked him specifically, hey, what would it take, for you guys to get more oomph out of the pass rush with those guys? And the reason I did was just sort of, I think, they have 7 sacks in 5 conference games. And I think 2.5 of those have come from the defensive ends. So he was like, well, we rush more than we drop those guys back, which is true. And he says, the guy who's leading us in sacks is a defensive end. Yeah, Leroy Harris is leading them in sacks, but they haven't had that in conference games. They haven't had that impact. And so I think as much as it's cheating to maybe name 2 players here, I'm looking at Dean Miller and I'm looking at Leroy Harris. And I'm saying basically, can you get after the quarterback and get him to the turf from that defensive end position? Because Dean Miller a year ago had 6 sacks and was second team All Big 12. And this team, for whatever reason, early on, they really did a good job getting after quarterbacks. I think teams weren't used to the different fronts that KU was showing. You had 4 sacks against Missouri too, where you were getting pressure and finding a way to get Bo Perbula to the turf. I'm looking at that duo of the weak side defensive end with those 2 guys and sitting here thinking like, hey, can these guys start getting sacks? Because I think the interior is getting some pressure. You look at Blake Harrell has maybe been their best pass rusher in conference play. And I think they're getting pressure from the linebackers, whether it's Trey Lathan when they send him, whether it's Bengali Kamara. I'd love to see that added element of Dean Miller getting back to where he's somebody that opposing teams really have to locate on passing downs, for Leroy Harris to continue to show his growth. Because we've talked about sort of how many guys could return on defense next year. Leroy Harris, Blake Harrell would be a really nice foundation for that defensive line. If Leroy Harris can close this year on a strong suit, I really feel like this defense could start taking another leap forward. And the other thing about the defensive ends, real quick, Nick, is a lot of times when Kansas has struggled to stop the run, they've struggled to set the edge. And you've had issues there. And so can they give the sort of complete game performance where, yes, they're doing the things they're supposed to do in the run game, but also they're becoming an impact in the passing game? That's why I'm looking at that position. And like I said, it may be cheating to pick 2 guys, but that's what I'm picking for this game. How about you?
Look, we make the rules on this show, Kevin. You can do it. Go for it. Yeah, earlier in the show, we talked about the old friend alert with some of the coaches on Oklahoma State. Well, there's a bit of an old friend alert going the other way, which is Lyric Rawls in the secondary for Kansas, who, of course, played the start of his career at Oklahoma State. Kevin was on the Oklahoma State team that was in the Big 12 title game.
Yeah.
And so he does definitely still have some ties to Oklahoma State. And so I'm looking at him. This secondary feels like it's starting to get a little bit more healthy. Mason Ellis played a lot more against K-State. Lyric Rawls, I think, continues to be sort of that veteran presence in the secondary for them. This feels like a game where maybe he has one of those pop moments, right? I think back to like the West Virginia game when he just annihilates that poor wide receiver across the middle of the field. Like, this feels like a game where maybe he has a couple of those moments because of the fact that it's against Oklahoma State. And, he said all the right things on Tuesday when we had a chance to speak with him about, not wanting to, not wanting to trash talk or whatever, or not, but there's got to be some extra juice there. No matter what he says to anybody, there's got to be an extra feeling there. And so I would maybe keep an eye on him, maybe for a big hit or maybe 2 in this game against Oklahoma State. All right. So we've talked about, I felt pretty bad. We spent, damn near 20 minutes just eviscerating this poor Oklahoma State program. It's already 1-7. But if that didn't make it obvious what our game picks are, Kevin, why don't you officially give your game pick? Because we forgot last week. We were ranting about other stuff, and oh my gosh, we flubbed it. We forgot to do game picks for K. That's probably why they lost, Kevin, because we didn't do our game picks properly. So
yeah, we screwed up. Yeah,
we're not going to mess it up.
That was on us.
Yeah. So why don't you share your game pick for this game, KU and Oklahoma State?
Yeah, I think the offense is going to be able to score in this one. I don't know that they're going to put up a huge number, but I do think that I like their ability to generate explosives in the passing game. I like the fact that Daniel Highshaw, like you said, is running a lot better. I say that KU will probably get to, let's say, 35 or so. And I do think Oklahoma State has a little bit of element of surprise. It wouldn't surprise me to see them score on one of their first few drives, scripted stuff or whatever else. I don't know that they get a whole lot else. And so I'll go ahead and say that Oklahoma State covers, but KU wins 35-14.
I get the sense, Kevin, that this game might unfold in a similar fashion to the West Virginia game.
Yeah.
In that I think that West Virginia might be able to, or excuse me, Oklahoma State. I've said it's similar fashion to the West Virginia game. I think that Oklahoma State is probably going to have a similar situation where the offense, I don't know, is going to be able to generate very much for them over the course of this game. And I think Kansas might get out to a decent lead and then probably slow down a little bit in the third and fourth quarter, and maybe Oklahoma State gets something late. In fact, I'm so confident that it might unfold in a similar fashion to the West Virginia game that I'm going to just go ahead and pick the same score. I think it'll be 41-10 Kansas against Oklahoma State. But again, I think this is one where it very easily could be 34-3 in the third quarter. And maybe Kansas starts to slow down a little bit and Oklahoma State, gets something back late in the game. But I don't know. I just don't see it from this offense for Oklahoma State. You mentioned Rodney Fields, who's probably maybe the guy to keep your eye on the most because he has had a couple nice games running the football this season for Oklahoma State. So maybe all of a sudden, if Oklahoma State is able to utilize the ground game quite a bit, that could be a factor. The quarterback situation is just so unpredictable that I don't really know what to expect there in terms of what they're maybe able to produce through the air. So that, to me, again, leads me more to believe that this offense for Oklahoma State probably is not going to be able to generate much. And again, I hope that on top of that, the KU defense also plays well. And again, when you have a team like this, that is not very good, obviously, make them look that bad, right? Prove why they are that bad. Play to make them look that bad. That's what I want to see from the KU defense. And then I think from the KU offense, same deal. This could be a game, Kevin, where they just have a solid B game from the offense, right? I don't think they need to do anything too crazy. Just to go out there, build some confidence, put the ball in the end zone a couple times, and then probably pack this one up. So I'll say 41-10 KU over Oklahoma State. Go ahead.
I was just going to say I like that. The big thing for me, to watch, and I think you'll be right there with me on this, is how motivated is KU? Does KU approach this like, hey, we think we've got this one in the bag, and next thing you know, you look up and it's 14-10 at halftime, and you're not feeling super great about the way you played? Or is it something where, hey, you truly flushed the K-State game, you were able to bring joy, as Kobe Baines said, and really line up and focus on this game and being 1-0 this week? I'm that more than anything. I'm not saying KU can't lose this game, like it's impossible, but I am saying this is a game where I'm maybe watching that even more than the final score, where it's just, how does KU respond? Well, you just face some adversity. Did you flush the adversity and you're back on the horse? Or is it the sort of thing where, that K-State game, you're giving them a chance to maybe beat you twice and you're not fully into this thing? And so that, to me, as much as the final score, is going to be the thing that I'm going to be watching, is just how quickly does this team get focused? How sharp are they? And I'll be honest with you, Nick, I know it's Oklahoma State. I know it's a game that they're supposed to win. But if they come out really sharp and focused and put Oklahoma State away, I'm going to feel pretty good about their ability to get to bowl eligibility this year.
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, I said it earlier in the show, but yeah, to me, this game, it wouldn't be just enough to win. You need to go out and make a statement, right? You need to go out and look good early and kind of put this one to bed early and feel like you're in a position where, okay, you're back on the horse. Let's go push for these last 3 games of the season and fight for 6-7 wins, right? That's kind of where I'm at as well. So once again, we'll be live on Saturday evening after the KU Oklahoma State game from David Booth Kansas Memorial Stadium. the best way for you to make sure that you can find us is to subscribe to the channel. Subscribe right here at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN on YouTube, and then you'll be notified when we go live on Saturday evening after the game. Busy time of year for us. We're going to be talking some KU basketball. KU basketball season starts officially next week, so we'll have a show coming out later this week talking about that as well and what we saw from the exhibition games that KU played in, so be on the lookout for that. And stay tuned right here for all of your coverage of KU football and KU basketball. Thanks so much for supporting us to this point. And again, tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell anybody, I don't know, grandma, grandpa, whoever, let them know that they can find all their KU coverage right here on KCSN with the Paid Podcast. But Kevin, you got anything else to add?
No, I mean, this will be the day after Halloween. So,
Sure, yeah.
And so right after that game, grab some of your kids' Halloween candy. Bring your kids into the room. No, it's never too early to get them started watching Pay Heed. So grab some candy as a family, fire it up, Pay Heed, and we'll talk about whatever happens in the game, win or lose.
There you go. Be sure to join us on Saturday. And until next time, he's Kevin Flaherty. I'm Nick Springer. We'll talk to you again soon. See ya.